Hello and welcome to another edition of the Business Buzz. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman. In today's rather hectic economic climate, having a sound path to your financial freedom and control of your assets is an important ingredient to not only surviving, but prospering. And we have a guest tonight, Brendan Marinelli from the North Star Wealth Partners, who's going to shed a little light on some of these aspects and talk a little bit about the overall economy. Brandon, welcome to the Business Buzz.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Excellent. Before we get into all that fun kind of stuff, maybe you can tell our viewers a little bit about your background and how you became one of the founding partners for North Star Wealth Management.
No, I appreciate it. My name is Brandon Marinelli. I am a founding partner at North Star Wealth Partners based out of West Hartford, Connecticut. That's where we have our primary office with locations in Glastonbury, Middletown, and North Haven. Been in the business now a little over a decade. Got my start right out of college working for a broker-dealer based out of Manhattan called Park Avenue Securities. Worked up through the ranks there, met my current other founding partner, Robert Laraya. He was my mentor at the time. And we started working together, and throughout the years just kind of developed a good relationship and kind of bounced around a couple places throughout our careers, and ultimately decided to branch out and build our own firm.
Mm-hmm. Now, you know, I talk a lot about that on the Business Buzz in terms of being an entrepreneur.
Sure.
And, you know, many people have the vision of doing it, but very few people actually put the pedal to the metal and make
Sure.
it happen. How'd you overcome some of the maybe, misgivings, little fear factor, all the things that, stop many people from fulfilling their dreams?
Sure. For us, it was a plan and process. So it wasn't something we just jumped into. Over the years, we had cultivated a plan, and it was very easy for us because it was something that we had taken from our experiences, and we looked at what we liked at some of the firms that we were at and some of the things that we didn't like. And our vision was to apply the good and kind of forego the bad and develop an ideal firm that would allow us the freedom and flexibility to serve our clients well.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Now, you talk about you were at various other places before you started North Star
Sure.
Wealth Management.
Yeah.
Is there sometimes a silver lining in any kind of maybe less than ideal situation? Some of the things you might have learned with some of the previous experiences that you had?
Yeah, absolutely. What we learned was that independence for us was always what we wanted. And what I mean by independence is we wanted the ability to offer products and services to our clientele without having any type of agenda or type of service or product steered in any type of direction. So the firms that we were at were great institutions to work for. It's just that they had an agenda that they wanted you to stick to, and sometimes that's not in the client's best interest.
Mm-hmm. So one of the key I've talked about with your partner, it's very interesting that one of the keys, and we'll talk more about it too, North Star's success is that you really don't steer your clients into one agenda because you're predisposed to do that, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. Our broker-dealer is a nationally known broker-dealer by the name of LPL Financial. They're the largest independently owned broker-dealer in the country. So what's nice about LPL is that they do not manufacture any type of product or services. It's more of an open architecture, which allows us as advisors to go and offer the free range of services that are out there.
Mm-hmm. Now we talked, I talked about, the beginning of the show in terms of the rather chaotic economic climate
Sure.
we've been in. Rather unprecedented, isn't it? I mean, most recessions are kind of just blips on the radar. This is certainly not the case, is it?
No, it's not. It's been everlasting, it seems. And for myself, getting into the business in the late 90s, I was born in the dot-com era, so I was used to what seemed great times, then all of a sudden just the impending doom where people's returns were being cut in half and their portfolios being very, very, very much damaged over time. What we're seeing now is it's a different world. There's a lot of things. Right now we live in the information age, so information today is a lot more readily available than it was 10 years ago, and the general public acts based on that data and obviously the facts that are available.
Mm-hmm. So how do you think we got into this mess? I mean, there's a lot of factors, but
Yeah.
what is your kind of prime indicator?
From what we've seen going back to 2008, I mean, that was the subprime lending, the mortgage-backed securities. I could get in detail for hours on end about that, but what you're seeing is obviously the fallout from that. People, obviously, the lending that took place, the over-leveraging from not only banks and institutions, but everyday people like yourself and myself, extending credit, above the means that people could actually be responsible. So, a lot of what took place in 2008, what we've seen is the shock waves, and it's somewhat of an aftermath that we've had to clean up over the years.
Mm-hmm. Do you think we'll be in a better situation down the road because of that?
Yeah, that's kind of a double-edged question, but I do think that the forward progress is positive. I think we've learned from that, and if anything, what you've seen is there's stricter, which is a good thing and a bad thing. The banks now aren't lending like they used to because of fear and tighter policy and tighter regulation, but at the end of the day, it's a good thing because we've learned from our mistake, and hopefully, we don't repeat it.
Mm-hmm. But that whole economic meltdown did shed a lot of negative light on financial institutions.
Absolutely.
Do you see that with your client base? I know North Star is very, has a excellent reputation,
Sure.
and deservingly so, but has that, kind of people a little more circumspect when they look at investing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, what you saw with that, it was a lot of these big institutions, you to hear the term too big to fail thrown around a lot. And what it did for us is we chose actually right in the midst of 2008 to break towards independence. And it was when the market was not playing well and things were going really bad, but we took that flight to independence. And what it did for us and what we saw with our consumers was a respect towards that, because now all of a sudden these big name organizations, they were normally shed in such a positive light with the fallout in 2008. Now some of the things that they did, some of their accounting measures, how they handled the whole process was not in their favor. So it was nice to not be tied to something that really we had no control over. If I was working for one of the larger Wall Street firms that kind of got into some of this mortgage-backed securities, clients were asking about that. It was easier being independent, being able to say, hey, we're not tied to their decisions, than versus working for one of those institutions and saying, I'm sorry, yeah, that happened and we're part of it.
Mm-hmm. So, Brendan, so it's actually in some ways, even though it was a very traumatic event, the recession that still hasn't really stopped in 2008, some investors saw your organization, North Star, as independent and therefore kind of maybe more trustworthy?
Sure. I mean, the history prior to 2008 was bigger was better. And, if you had Merrill Lynch behind you, Morgan Stanley behind you, all great companies. But at the time, that spoke volumes about who you were as an advisor, who you represented, how you represented yourself in the marketplace. Whereas when a lot of the fallout happened with the economy and the markets, being able to be independent and kind of away from those types of decisions on the, higher ups down on Wall Street, it did help us because we weren't impacted as much as they were.
Mm-hmm. Now, we talked about how you started with your partner, Robert, North Star Wealth Management. How did yourself, what attracted you to the financial world? What made it interesting to you?
It was just something that was out there, as I think any college person who's in college, I was one of those people who didn't know what they wanted to do, but I know I liked finance, I know I liked working with people, and I know I liked educating people. So it was a means for me to actually be out in the general public, working with individuals, having that interaction, staying on the brink of what's going on with finance, the markets, economy, and being able to bring that to the general public in a way that I hope for them was easy to understand.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. Now, when you first started out, shed a little light on that. Isn't it very difficult to get started in the financial industry?
Yeah.
You got to do a lot of cold calling. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was at an institution at the time. I was working for an insurance company. I was 21, and I told them, I said, I'd stayed there for a year, and I told them I was thinking about going out in the public and doing this. And ironically, the manager at the time said, you know what, if you're going to do it, why not give it a shot now? I didn't have, wasn't married with children, didn't have obligations, but the statistics were against me. Out of every 15 people who initially come into the business, 1 or 2 of them will survive, especially at a young age. So it was tough, but luckily I had a mentor and my partner, Robert Laraya, in a good institution that had good education, good support. And what I did, I think what a lot of people didn't do is they try, most people try and reinvent the wheel. They have a better way to do it, whereas I actually worked in conjunction with my partner, and we worked together with clients helping educate them. And for the first couple of years, I just kind of sat back and watched how it all worked. And as time went on, I was able to provide more and more input until finally the training wheels came off.
Oh, nice. And do you really believe the fact that, and I know about your company, that when you try to sell something to someone, that's one way of looking at it. But
Yeah.
when you actually try to look out for their best interest, doesn't it sometimes make the sales process easier?
Yeah, and I explain this to any existing or new client that 80% of what we do is education. The other 20% is simply implementing. So our approach, being independent, again, using mutual funds for an example, there's over 17,000 mutual funds out there. We're not biased to provide one particular fund to a client. We could work with the array of funds that are out there. So when we sit down with a client, it's really providing them options as it relates to their unique situation and saying, A, B, and C are out there. Which one do you feel, feels most comfortable? And, a lot of times they'll say, you know what, A and B aren't for me, but can you talk a little bit more about C? So at the end of the day, when you're coming from an independent standpoint, it allows you to put the client at ease and really allow them to make the decision.
Mm-hmm. I know North Star has a very good reputation. I'm sure clients come in to your organization because of that, but for those clients that you have to kind of outreach to, how do you do that from a marketing perspective?
We're very unique, Jeff, in the fact that 90% of our clientele is developed internally. So it is really, we're not out there because unfortunately we're in a business where not everybody is a potential client for us. Mm-hmm. We have and it's not to knock anybody, it's just our forte is for a certain niche client. And what typically happens is clients who go through the process are very likely to recommend their friends and family, who are in the same situation or might need some help or education in the realm of finance.
Mm-hmm. Now, why is it that so many people really don't have control of their financial future and destiny? Why is that? I mean, many people, worry more about what they're going to do for the weekend than
Sure.
worrying about their own financial security. Why is that?
I think a lot of people have a false sense of security. It comes down to discipline. Again, I go back to talking about living in the information age. There's so much information available at your fingertips. People are trying to keep up with the Joneses, and we like nice things. I mean, who doesn't? We're Americans, and we like to kind of overindulge sometimes, and we like to be able to do things that make us feel good. But I think sometimes it just gets a little bit overwhelming. And today, you've seen the credit easing, but it was very easy in the past to get credit, whether it was from a credit card, home equity lines of credit, mortgage, and people, in essence, really overextended themselves. And I think what you're seeing from 2008, as far as the financial realm, you're still seeing that on an individual level as well, where people are still trying to dig out from maybe biting off a little bit more than they could chew.
Mm-hmm. That's also true in the housing market as
Sure.
well. I mean, many people who probably even shouldn't have a house
Yep.
qualified for loans and qualified for homes that they really shouldn't
Sure.
be in, right?
Yeah, I mean, we call it herd mentality. I mean, if you look around and everyone else is building and buying $500,000 houses and they're making what you make and they're getting approved, you look at these institutions as almost like a big brother or an adult saying, hey, okay, well, if I can get approved for this, that must mean it's okay. And that's where we got into a lot of trouble.
Mm-hmm. But still, isn't that weighing on the economy that so many individuals are, if you will, underwater? Hasn't it been, is still a big factor in our economy?
Yeah, it's still a big factor, and you can see, a lot of, the housing market's still, doing what it's doing. I mean, a lot of people are calling for a bottom, and we've been hearing that for years, and some indicators are coming out that there is some positive light on the horizon, but that overindulgence that we go back to, some of these people, they can't sell their houses, so they're stuck. They're still a little bit over leveraged, paying more than they should. A lot of people did these adjustable rate mortgages, and some of them are coming due. And luckily, interest rates are still pretty low. But that's something that is a variable. What they did initially was some type of teaser loan at maybe 0% finance, 1 or 2. Now all of a sudden that goes up to 5 or 6%, and it's a big difference in their cash flow.
That was a big factor, wasn't it? It's called, I believe, a balloon payments, right?
Balloon payments, sometimes referred to as ARMs, 5-year ARMs, 7-year ARMs. There's all different variations of those loans, but people just you become accustomed to what you make. And I always try to explain to my clients that it's not all about, if I only get that raise, if I just make a little bit more money. You have to learn to live within your comfort zone, because we see it all the time. People get a raise and all of a sudden that money's accounted for, and that's where budgeting and really having a sound financial plan comes into play.
Mm-hmm. And do you help with your clients? I assume you help them build a financial plan. That's part of what North Star does. Correct?
Yes. We have a couple different facets in how we work with clients. There's really 2 ways. Some clients come to us and they're looking for strictly money management, help with their assets, managing investments, so on and so forth. And for that, we do charge a fee to manage those assets. And then there's other clients who come to us for a full-fledged financial plan. And what we do is we basically start from the ground up and really kind of roll our sleeves up and gather data and spend a lot of time talking about, where